The morning was chaotic because our alarm clock didn't go off thanks to a power cut overnight. This meant my wife and I had to hurry to get ready for work. She was in more of a hurry than I was, since my job starts at 9 a.m. and it's just a 15-minute drive from our house. Before heading out to work, my wife usually checks her email, but she was rushing and forgot to shut down her computer. As I was about to turn it off, I noticed an email she received a few days ago with the subject line, "Aloha to a great time." Curiosity got the best of me, and I opened it, only to discover that my wife was planning a trip to Hawaii with another man, while I would be away on a 2-week business trip. This revelation hit me hard and left me feeling devastated. Let me provide some background. Kathy, my wife, and I were introduced by mutual friends over 12 years ago who believed we'd hit it off. Turns out we both valued fitness and a healthy lifestyle. Kathy worked as a yoga instructor and personal trainer, while I pursued a career in marketing at a mid-sized company, aspiring for growth. I have a passion for the outdoors, often engaging in activities like hiking, mountain biking, and running. We shared many hobbies and looked good as a couple. Kathy is 5 feet 6 inches tall, with long brown hair, brown eyes, and an attractive figure. I stand at 6 feet 3 inches, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an athletic physique. Was it love at first sight? No, but we developed a strong friendship that later blossomed into romance. It took a couple of years, but we eventually tied the knot, and I believed we were happy until now. However, after reading this email, I realized our marriage was facing serious challenges. Apparently, Kathy and this guy Gary had been secretly planning a romantic getaway for some time now. Despite knowing about my upcoming business trip, which was a significant opportunity for me and the company, she went ahead with it. I was gearing up for a 2-week business trip with some colleagues to secure big accounts. Landing these deals could mean a promotion and a nice pay raise. But now, all I could focus on was this email in front of me. I started digging into her other emails to learn more about this Gary. Turns out she had kept all their correspondence neatly filed under trips. Convenient, right? Kathy isn't tech-savvy, but I'm on computers all the time, so navigating through was easy for me. It was clear she'd been involved with this guy for the past 6 months. But why? I couldn't see any obvious signs of unhappiness. Our bed life was good, and we enjoyed each other's company. What led her into the arms of another man? My mind was racing, but I had to head to work. Before leaving, I made sure to copy all the emails onto a thumb drive to examine them later and maybe figure out more about Gary and why she did this. After shutting down her computer, I rushed off to work, consumed by thoughts of her and Gary. As I processed the shock of this revelation, anger welled up inside me, and I craved revenge on a grand scale. I'm not typically one for violence or seeking payback, but this situation was different. Her betrayal was unforgivable. I briefly pondered when and where it all began, but decided it didn't matter. What I did want was to learn more about Gary and how I could make his life miserable. I didn't wish harm on him, although the thought did cross my mind. Instead, I wanted them both to experience a very public humiliation. However, I still needed to plan carefully. With 6 weeks ahead, I closed my office door at work and brainstormed. I needed more intel on Gary and the specifics of their trip. Then, an idea struck me on how to sabotage their plans and expose their affair in a way she couldn't deny. It was a bold plan, but I was determined to make her face the consequences. Throughout the day, I managed to get some real work done, but my mind kept circling back to my scheme. When it was time to leave, I stayed back in my office for over an hour, jotting down what I needed and how to get it. I also noted the risks involved in my plan. If things went south or I got caught, it could mean serious trouble, possibly even jail time. But I was willing to take that chance. To gather more intel on Gary, I knew I needed access to Kathy's email and computer. I considered downloading software to crack her passwords, but quickly realized that could leave a digital trail. If I wanted to pull this off without getting caught, I needed to be careful. So I had to find a way to get what I needed without leaving any trace back to me. Over the next few days, I bought some disposable cell phones from different stores, paying with cash, and got a small laptop that I could use at places with free Wi-Fi. This way, my actions couldn't be traced back to my workplace or home. I also purchased several wireless video cameras and bugs to place around the house, hoping to catch her bringing this a-hole into our bed for some extramarital fun. The idea made my blood run cold, but maybe they'd talk about their upcoming trip, giving me the info I needed for my plan. As time went by, I tried my best to act normal around my wife, so she wouldn't suspect that I knew about her affair. It was tough, but after a few weeks, pretending became second nature. I'd smile at her lovingly while secretly seething at the thought of her being with another guy. I guess I missed my true calling as an actor. During this time, I reached out to some old friends using one of the disposable phones I bought, ensuring there'd be no connection back to me. My first call was to a college buddy I hadn't spoken to in over 14 years. Steve was a real party animal back then, the guy to go to for a good time. "Hey Tank, how've you been, man?" At first, Steve didn't remember, but after some reminiscing about our college parties, it all clicked for him. "Hey Hank, yeah, it's all coming back to me now. Those were some good times, huh? What have you been up to lately?" I quickly filled him in on what I've been doing since college. He shared that things hadn't quite turned out the way he hoped, but he's hanging in there. "So, what's the reason for this call?" It wasn't just about reminiscing. I had to be cautious about bringing up the real issue, so I suggested meeting in person. "Look, I need some help, and I thought you might be the guy for the job. How about we grab lunch and chat about it?" He hesitated for a moment, then agreed, saying, "Sure thing, anything for an old college buddy." We set up a meeting spot away from my workplace, but close to his for a few days later. I was really counting on his help as time was ticking away, and I didn't have anyone else to turn to. I'd also set up cameras and bugs in the bedroom and living room, thinking those were the spots where they'd likely talk and do other stuff. After the first week, nothing significant showed up on the recordings. I started to think maybe they were meeting at his place, as it might be less risky for their affair. But the following week told a different story. It appeared she brought Gary over to our place one late morning, and they spent over 2 hours having closeness in every possible position. It disgusted me to watch, but I had to endure it to see if they'd discuss their trip or reveal any useful details. Yet they didn't. The next week, I checked the cameras again and saw they were back, but this time not for closeness. They just talked about their upcoming trip, giving me the info I needed, the flight number and departure time. Listening in, I could hear the excitement in my wife's voice as they planned. I was beyond furious, even considering harming them, but I pushed that thought aside. I wanted them both to suffer for a long time. This revenge was going to haunt them for life, even into their graves. I imagined a day when my soon-to-be ex-wife, old and gray, lay on her deathbed, and I would come in with a smile, leaning over to tell her how I had ruined her Hawaii trip. I'd stand up, flash a smile at her as she gazed at me in shock, then turn and walk away. Now, more determined than ever to succeed, I still had one risky task left to tackle. I finally learned more about Gary. He and my wife both work as personal trainers at the same health club. Turns out he has a habit of pursuing other men's wives, but that's about to hit a rough patch. He lives close to the club in a small condo complex, so I decided to do some surveillance. I took a day off from work, telling my boss I had personal matters to handle before our business trip. With a digital camera equipped with a powerful zoom, I observed his place for a few hours. It was a basic 2-bedroom complex, and it seemed his neighbors were away during the day for work, with no security cameras in sight. This worked well for my covert plans. During my meeting with Steve, I felt anxious about what I had to ask him. It was the riskiest part of my plan, but if I could get what I needed, it would be worth it. When I spotted Steve entering the restaurant, I waved him over to the table where I was seated. It was tucked away in the back, and the place was fairly quiet, with only a few customers having a late lunch. As he approached, he greeted me with a casual, "Long time no see, bro." I wasted no time and got straight to the point. Steve looked worse for wear, like he could have been an extra on the Walking Dead show. I wanted to keep it brief. If he couldn't assist me, I'd have to seek help elsewhere. We reminisced about our college days and the epic parties Steve used to throw. He was quite the party animal back then, but it seemed to have taken its toll on him. He appeared much older than his actual age, at least 15 years older. I needed to get to the point, so I asked him directly why I had invited him, to see if he or someone he knew could help me get some party favors for a private event I was planning. I passed him a list and asked if he could assist me. I assured him I'd compensate him for his help. Steve glanced at the list, initially looking surprised, but then he grinned. He agreed to help without hesitation, saying it sounded like an exciting party. He even asked if he could bring along an old college buddy. Relieved, I agreed, as long as he could get me the items on the list. I told him once he had everything, I'd provide the details for the party. Steve requested upfront cash to purchase the items, so I handed him an envelope with several $1,000s inside. He remarked on the scale of the party and confirmed the cash was more than enough. We arranged to meet the following week for the exchange, and I gave him my new cell phone number in case of any issues. With everything settled, we left the restaurant. It was crucial that everything went smoothly, as my wife and her lover were set to depart the day after I left for my trip. 2 weeks before my departure, I met with Steve, and he managed to procure everything I needed. All I needed to do was hide these items until the timing was perfect. 3 days before my trip, I left work early and checked my wife's packed suitcase. It was all set for her trip, the cheating woman. Carefully, I slipped a few surprises into her bag as a parting gift. I made sure to hide them well so she wouldn't discover them while packing or unpacking. I wasn't aiming for her to find them anyway. Then, I embarked on another risky step, breaking into Gary's place. I knew his work schedule, so that wasn't a problem. However, I had never attempted anything like this before. I bought a lockpick set and learned from a book I found online. It's amazing what you can buy on the internet. I practiced on various locks at home and work, and I became quite skilled at it. Feeling confident, I told my boss I needed an extended lunch break and headed to Gary's condo with my lockpick set. I was surprised at how quickly I managed to pick the lock, getting inside his home in just over a minute. I focused on speed because I wanted to carry out my plans swiftly and leave no evidence behind. Wearing latex gloves, I headed straight to his bedroom, where I found his packed bag ready for the trip. Just like I did with my wife's suitcase, I added a few travel gifts to his bag to make their trip memorable. After that, I went to the kitchen and found a can of coffee. I emptied the coffee into a mixing bowl, placed some packets at the bottom of the can, refilled it with coffee, and put it back where I found it, making sure everything looked undisturbed. With everything back in place, I left Gary's place and returned home. But I still had one more thing to do. A couple of days before my trip, I contacted a friend who had a cousin working with the TSA at the airport. I had all the details about my wife and Gary's flight. Now it was about getting this info to the right person without revealing its source. So I contacted my friend, but had to be careful about how I explained where I got the info from. "Jack, I need a favor, but keep this info confidential," I said. I gave him the flight details and Gary's name, but didn't mention my wife's. Jack agreed to pass it on to his cousin discreetly. I also got rid of all the cameras and bugs so no one could find them. And I left some surprises in Kathy's car to add to her troubles. The day before my trip, I decided to have a little fun at my wife's expense. When I got home from work, I sat down looking upset. My wife noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" "Something went down at work today." "Yep, the clients we were supposed to meet pulled the plug on the meetings. So now, I won't be jetting off on that trip, and the company's missing out on a big opportunity to grow," I joked. I saw the shock and worry on her face. That's when it hit me she was probably scheming to get me out of town so she and Gary could have their Hawaii getaway. Can't they still send you and try to smooth things over with those clients? You and your team have put in so much time and effort on this project. It'd be a real shame to see all that hard work go to waste, she said, trying to guilt trip me. That made me furious. How could she talk about shame when she had none? Her and Gary were about to pay big time. I chuckled and reassured her. "Just kidding, honey. The trip's still on. No worries." Relief washed over her face and she grinned. "You had me going there for a sec. So are you all packed?" "Yep. Just got to toss a few things in my carry-on and I'm good to go. You won't miss me too much while I'm away, will you? Do you have any plans? Maybe a girls' night out or something?" "Nah, nothing like that. I'll just be here, waiting for my dear hubby to come back," she said. God, I almost burst out laughing at that. But I was too mad. The next day, my wife drove me to the airport and dropped me off. I gave her a long, passionate kiss, my hands caressing her sweet face. It would be the last kiss I'd ever give her, so I wanted it to be memorable. I joined the rest of the group and we boarded the flight. It was a smooth ride, and once we landed and checked into the hotel, I called home using the hotel room phone. No one picked up, so I left a message. "Honey, I did something dumb. I left my phone in the cab and won't be able to call you until I get it back or get a new one. If you need me, leave a message at the front desk and I'll call you later." I hadn't actually forgotten my phone. I just needed an excuse not to take her calls. The next day arrived, and I made sure to turn off my phone so I wouldn't be disturbed during my meetings with clients. When I got back to my hotel room, I checked for messages, but there were none. So I turned on my phone and found no messages from my wife or anyone else. Well, maybe they managed to pass through airport security. The following day, the meetings went even better than the first ones, and we returned to the hotel early. There were several messages waiting for me on the hotel room phone. One was from my wife, another from her father, and the third from a DEA agent, which made me smile. I then checked my cell phone and saw several messages waiting for me. I listened to the messages on the hotel phone. The first was from my wife, and she was crying. "Baby, it's me. I'm in big trouble and I really need you. Please come home now, please." After that, all I heard was crying. The next message was from my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law. "Hank, Your wife has been trying to get in touch with you. She's been arrested and needs you home now. Please give me a call when you have a chance." The final message was from a DEA agent named DeFranco. He identified himself as Agent DeFranco and wanted to discuss my wife's arrest on pills charges. He provided his contact information and some other details. I was thrilled and couldn't stop smiling, but I had to maintain a serious demeanor around my colleagues. Everything had gone according to plan so far, but I still needed to act surprised and shocked to avoid suspicion that I was involved. The next morning, I contacted my boss and informed him of a serious family issue without providing specifics. He agreed to let me leave the meetings temporarily to handle the emergency, but stressed the importance of returning promptly to finalize deals with the clients. I caught the first flight back home, and upon landing, I retrieved my lost cell phone and called my father-in-law. "What's happening?" "I received your message, but I can't believe it. Kathy was arrested on pills charges? She doesn't use any substance. Did this happen at the health club?" I knew exactly where the incident occurred. "No, she was traveling with a friend to Hawaii, and they were stopped at security where they found some illegal things on her and her friend," her father said in a low voice, sounding embarrassed. "Hold on a second. Just hold on. She told me she was going to be home and didn't have any plans. Who was this friend she was going to Hawaii with?" "I bet one of her girlfriends talked her into going and got her into all this mess," I replied. Her father hesitated for a moment. "I know it was with someone else. The important thing to remember here, Hank, is that she's in trouble and needs your help. She loves you, and I know you love her too," he said. I interrupted him. "What aren't you telling me, Dad? Who was she traveling with?" I yelled into the phone, feeling a bit too satisfied. There was silence, then he cleared his throat. "She was traveling with a man, Gary somebody. He has been arrested too," he admitted. Once again, I interrupted him. "So you're telling me my wife, your daughter, was flying off to Hawaii with another man while I was out working hard to earn a living, and she gets busted for pills possession. Is that what you're telling me?" I demanded. "Yes. I'm afraid that's what I'm telling you," he responded. I took a long pause. "Okay, I need to talk to her lawyer and then this DEA agent, and after that, I'm going to talk to her. We'll see what happens next, but she better have a darn good explanation for why she was about to go to Hawaii with another man and had substance with her," I thought to myself. I hung up on her father before he could respond. When I got home, I saw there were over 20 messages waiting, so I began to play them back. The first one was from me about losing my cell phone. The next few were from Kathy, hoping I would check our messages while I was on my business trip. Several were from her father, and the rest were from her lawyer asking me to get in touch as soon as possible. I called the lawyer, and since he wasn't in the office at that time, I made an appointment for the following morning. Next, I called the DEA agent DeFranco and agreed to meet him at his office downtown later that afternoon. I quickly got cleaned up and headed out, all the while trying to think if I had covered my tracks so none of this could come back to me. Soon, I found myself in what I can only assume was an interrogation room. Agent DeFranco walked in carrying a folder. "Glad you were able to stop by and see me," he said. "I have some questions about your wife that I was hoping you could answer," he said, looking at something in the folder. "Listen, my wife isn't involved with substance. As far as I've known her, she's never taken anything illegal. Honestly, she doesn't even drink that much. This has to be a big misunderstanding or a mistake. She's a yoga instructor, for crying out loud. Why would she be involved with illegal things?" I was trying to act a bit, but Agent DeFranco didn't look up. "People make all sorts of dumb choices for all sorts of dumb reasons. Now, did you know your wife was going to Hawaii with this guy, Gary? She told us he was just a friend, but Gary claims they were going for a romantic getaway. So, do you know Gary? Were you aware that your wife was having an affair? Did you have any idea about the substance?" Now he was staring at me intensely. I took a deep breath to steady myself. "I didn't know any of this until I spoke with my father-in-law this morning, but I still can't believe it. She must have been manipulated into this." She's too good of a person to get mixed up in something like this. I didn't want to push it too far. I figured this guy could spot a liar right away, so I had to tread carefully. "Well, I guess you didn't know. Hate to break it to you, buddy, but your wife was cheating on you with a illegal seller of all people. We've already searched his place and found even more pills, and soon we'll be searching your home too. You can either cooperate and let us in, or we'll just get a search warrant. Either way, we'll be searching your place soon." I knew her lawyer would advise against it, but this was about protecting myself, and it would look better if I wasn't trying to hide anything. So I agreed, and soon I was back at the house with dozens of DEA and FBI agents, along with a couple of their dogs, going through everything. They took a few things, including some pill containers she kept in the medicine cabinet. The following day, during my meeting with Kathy's lawyer, I briefed him on my talk with DeFranco and the search. He wasn't pleased. If you're approached by any law enforcement, I want to be there before you say anything. Got it? I nodded, feeling irritated. Let me be clear, I told him. I want to know everything that led to my wife's arrest. All I know is she was about to fly to Hawaii with this guy, Gary. If either of you wants my help, someone better start explaining how this happened. Do I make myself clear? He responded, I can't discuss your wife's case with you. That's when I walked out. Next, I headed to the jail where she was held and requested to see her. In a room with other inmates meeting with family or lawyers at round metal tables, bolted down stools, she came in, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, no makeup, her hair pulled back into a tight, messy ponytail. She appeared exhausted, like she hadn't slept for days. Oh, baby, I'm so relieved you're here, she sobbed. I was going to hug her, but a guard intervened, saying there could be no physical contact. This only made her cry harder. It's okay, honey, we'll figure this mess out. Right now, I need to hear your side of the story. How did you end up about to go to Hawaii with this guy? I asked calmly. Her tears increased. Hank, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So it's true. You were having an affair with this guy, Gary, a pills seller. How could you? Weren't you happy with me? Don't you love me? I just don't get it. Him, you, and the pills. What were you thinking? I paused, knowing she didn't have an answer. Please believe me when I say I've always loved you. It was a mistake. Can you forgive me? She pleaded with me. I looked at her for a while, then spoke up. Maybe I could have forgiven you, but you broke my heart completely. So, I can't forgive you. When I leave here, I'm getting a divorce lawyer and changing all the locks on the house. I'm sending all your stuff to your parents' place because I want to erase every trace of you from my home. You're out of my life now. I don't want anything to do with you. And tell your lawyer not to use me as a character witness because I won't say anything good about you. Farewell, Kathy. I wish you the best. She was sobbing and pleading for me to stay, saying she needed me. Without looking back, I headed home and began packing her belongings. The next day, I hired a locksmith to change all the locks. Then I scheduled a security company to install a high-quality system the following week. In just a few days, I had most of her things packed and ready to be sent to her parents' house. I received several calls from Kathy, but I ignored them all. I had no interest in talking to her. Eventually, I went back to work, and we successfully signed those important clients we had been chasing. This led to my promotion and a salary increase. Divorcing Kathy was smooth. It was a straightforward split with no spousal support, and she had to cover her legal fees from her pills arrest. Despite her attempts to reach me, I wanted to keep my distance. She didn't go to trial due to overwhelming evidence, and her lawyer advised her to take a plea deal for a shorter sentence. She wasn't pleased. On the other hand, Gary fought hard to prove his innocence, but ended up with a 15-year sentence, while Kathy got 5 years. It was the day of Kathy's sentencing, and she wanted to meet me one last time before going to court. I agreed, and we met at her lawyer's office an hour before her court appearance. She appeared teary-eyed when she looked at me. Hank, I just want you to know that Gary meant nothing to me. It's you I've always loved, and will continue to love. I'm truly sorry for hurting you like this. It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. I hope you can forgive me someday, she said, almost in tears again. Kathy, I need to understand one thing. Why did you do it? Were you bored? Did I not satisfy you in bed? Was it the thrill of doing something wrong and getting away with it? What was it that led you to do this and ruin our marriage? I asked with sadness. She looked at me. I honestly don't know why. Maybe it was the excitement of doing something forbidden, but I've always loved you. I guess you didn't love me enough, or else you wouldn't have done this, she replied. Kathy, I hope this is the last time I have to deal with you. I don't want to see or hear from you ever again. I want you to spend your time in prison thinking about what you've lost because you craved excitement. I bet you'll have some thrilling experiences in there once those ladies notice you. She began crying again, but this time out of fear. Over the next few years, the company grew, and I climbed up to become a VP. We expanded our business, opening an office in New York, and I was selected to lead it. This meant selling my house, moving to Manhattan, and getting an apartment. I received a few letters from Kathy early on, but I sent them back without opening. That part of my life was over, and I was ready to move forward. It's been 7 years now, and life in New York has been good. I'm still single, and the dating scene in New York is treating me well. I was still single, dating a different woman every few months. I had no interest in getting married again and risking betrayal. Once was more than enough. While sitting in my office, I got a call from the lobby and my assistant Amy came in. She said there's a woman downstairs who wants to speak with me. She claims her name is Kathy. I paused for a moment, then told her to send Kathy up, but to have two security guards nearby. I also gave Amy something to do for me. I wrote it down and handed it to her. "Call me a few minutes after you bring her in," I said. Amy read what I wrote and smiled. A few minutes later, Kathy was in my office. She looked at least 10 years older and had gained some weight, not in a flattering way. Her once beautiful long brown hair now showed some gray and was frayed. I noticed the bags under her sad-looking eyes. Her clothes were stylish but conservative and seemed a bit outdated. I looked at her, feeling nothing. No love, no hate, not even pity. I was just emotionally empty. "So, Kathy, what brings you here?" "Hank, I was hoping to talk to you." I felt the urge to explain what happened to me. Honestly, I had no clue about the substance, and I still don't know how they ended up in my bags. Gary must have sneaked them in without my knowledge. "I'm not into substance, never have been. Please believe me, I'm begging you," Kathy pleaded with me. "Kathy, you destroyed our marriage for a fling and made our whole relationship a lie. Why should I trust you now? Why did you go out of your way to find me just to tell me another lie? You don't get it. I love you. I still do. I want us to be together again. I want to make things right." Just then my desk phone rang and I put it on speaker. "Yes, Amy, what's up?" "Stacy called to confirm that you should get 4 tickets for the opening as her parents are coming into town and then want to meet you. Let her know that I'll buy 4 tickets. Also, find out where her parents are staying. I want to send her mother a dozen roses." I ended the call and looked back at Kathy. "You were saying?" Kathy was on the verge of tears. "Who's Stacy?" "Oh, she's just someone I've been seeing lately, but you're not here to talk about my dating life. You mentioned you still have feelings for me. While I appreciate that, I want to make it clear that I don't feel the same way about you anymore. At the end of the day, your dad informed me about your arrest and your plan to go to Hawaii with Gary. When your affair came to light, I was done with our relationship. Now please go, and I don't want to see you again. Do you understand?" I listened carefully, but I had nothing to do with those pills they found. I was framed. "Enough with your lies, Kathy. You cheated on me before, and you're still lying now. Please leave and don't come back. I've told security to have you arrested if you return. Do you understand?" She was crying silently, but she nodded. I escorted her to the door, and the security guards escorted her out. Amy came in afterward. "What was that all about?" "Oh, that was just me saying goodbye to a chapter of my life.